Hey, it's Jawyaker. Hope you're doing well, and today we're back with some more Minecraft dungeons. Well, kinda. So, in the past, I've ranked every weapon and artifact in the game, but today I want to be trying something a little bit different. I want to be ranking every level in the game. So, I just want to be ranking the levels based on the rewards that you can get, like the design, because I really like level design and what they look like. So, I just want to be ranking them. And yeah, let's get into it. Alright, so up first is Creeper Woods. And I actually like this level quite a bit. I like the map design. I think it's fun. Not really any bosses in it that I remember because it's one of the starter levels, so that's kind of nice. And there, you can get some really nice items from it, like the Deathcap Mushroom Boots of Swiftness. So this is going into B tier. Up next is Creepy Crypt, and it's the secret level that you can find in Creeper Woods. But it's kind of the same in my opinion, so it's just going to chill in B tier with Creeper Woods. Next is the mystery level, and this is the level that you get from finding ruins throughout all the levels, which I do like. I do think that is quite fun. I like going through the levels and finding the secret. So just for that, it would probably go into B tier, but I really don't like the loot in it because after you go through and find all these secrets, you just get the enchanted grass, which is really not a good artifact. I think most people can agree that it's not the best. And so for that, it's going to go into C tier just because that artifact is just kind of sad. Up next is the tower, and this is going into S tier because first off, you can get super good loot if you beat the tower, then you get the 263 gear, which is super overpowered, and it changes every week, so it's always fun to come back to and see what's happening. So it's going to be our first S tier. Next is Squid Coast, and as far as training levels go, I'd say it's pretty good. But as far as levels go, it's going to go into D tier because the only thing you can get is the firework arrow. Up next is Soggy Cave, and if you've seen my videos, you know I love this level because it's super short, which is super nice. And at the end, you get one of those like black obsidian chests, which give super good loot. Uniques come from them pretty frequently. The only downside is it doesn't have like the best loot from it, but I still think it's really good, especially because it's so short, so it's going into S tier. Next is Soggy Swamp, and to be honest, I don't love this level because I don't think the map design is that fun. The loot that you can get from it isn't that great, and the boss fight at the end is really annoying because some boss fights are fine, but the cauldron is just so annoying because it can heal itself. It's super overpowered in my opinion. It's just super annoying to fight. It's not very fun. So honestly, I think it might be our first F tier. Next is Redstone Mines, and I think it belongs in C tier. Next is Cacti Canyon, and I also think, yet again, this belongs in C tier. Next is Pumpkin Pastures, and I really like this level. I think it's fun. You can get good loot from it, like the Iron Golem. The boss isn't very hard because it's just an Invoker, which isn't too challenging. Just overall, I think the map design is also pretty fun, so it's going into A tier. Up next is Fiery Forge, and I think it's kind of similar to Redstone Mines. I don't think they're super different, but I do think I like Fiery Forge a little bit better. I like the loot that you can get from it more, so it's going one tier above into B tier. Next is the Desert Temple. I'm not a huge fan of this level. I think the loot isn't too great. The boss is pretty fun to fight, but nothing too special. But the map design is quite fun. I do like the map design, but overall I think it belongs in C tier. Next is Archhaven, and to be honest, I do like the design of this secret level, but to be honest, I forgot that this was even in the game. I almost forgot to include it in the list because it's kind of just there in my opinion. I hardly ever play it. The loot isn't super great. Like, honestly, I can't remember the last time I played it, so it's going into F tier. Up next is the Lower Temple, and I don't think this level is anything too special, and it's going into D tier. Next is High Block Halls, and to be honest, I think this is just a little bit sadder version of Obsidian Pinnacle, so it's going to go into C tier. Next is the Obsidian Pinnacle, and I actually like this level quite a bit. I think the map design is really fun. You get some little bits of lore, like the big purple golem dude is in there. Don't know what he's doing there, but he's there. The boss is actually pretty fun to fight. I like the boss fight. I don't think it's too hard, but it's also not super easy. Overall, I think this is a really fun level. The loot's pretty good, but I think this is probably an S tier level. Up next is Under Halls, and it's the secret level that you can find in High Block Halls. And like with Archhaven, I often forget that this secret level even exists, so it's also going into F tier. Alright, so we're now done with all of the levels that are in like the base game, so now we're moving on to the DLC levels, and the first one is the Stronghold. And this level, I think you can find like 12 of those obsidian chests that you can find in Soggy Cave, so it can be really good for loot, but it also takes probably like 5 times as long as Soggy Cave. It is a pretty long level, and so for that, it's not going to go into S tier like Soggy Cave would, but I still do think it belongs in A tier just because of the amount of loot that you can get from it. Also, the map design on the Stronghold is also pretty fun. Up next is the Dingy Jungle. To be honest, map design isn't my favorite, loot is mediocre, and overall I think it belongs in D tier. Next is the Overgrown Temple, and in my opinion, this is probably going to be an F tier level just because, yet again, loot isn't really the best, design is alright, and the boss, in my opinion, is actually too easy. I don't think it's that hard of a boss, and overall, just not my favorite. Up next is the Treetop Tangle, and it's going into D tier. Next is the Panda Plateau, and this would go into the lower levels with some of its other fellow levels, but it's got pandas in it, so it gets to go into C tier. Next is the Colossal Ramparts, and the Howling Peaks DLC is probably one of my favorite DLCs in the game. I like it a lot. The loot and enchantments that you get from the DLC is super fun. The level design is really fun in my opinion, so this is going into A tier. Up next is the Windswept Peaks, and it's going into A tier. Next is Gale Sanctum, and to be honest, I don't like it as much as these other two levels, just because the boss kinda is not the best. If anything, it's more annoying than hard, just because you have to fight through so many waves and whatnot. Overall, not my favorite, but it's still pretty good, so it's going into B tier. Next is the Gauntlet of Gales, and it's kind of like a puzzle level, which is kind of fun, and they also released it after they released the original DLC, which is kind of interesting, but overall, I think it's a pretty good level, and it's going into B tier. Up next is the Creeping Winter DLC, and I'm just going to group all of these together because they all belong into the same tier in my opinion, and that's F tier. To be honest, I'm not a huge fan of this DLC. It's not that interesting in my opinion, the items aren't that great, the levels aren't super fun, the final boss is kind of boring, and overall, I'm just not a huge fan, so they're all going into F. Next is the Coral Rise, and I actually like the Underwater DLC quite a bit. This level is pretty good. It's not quite A tier material, but I do think it's B tier. Up next is the Abyssal Monument, and I do think that this one's S tier just because the loot is pretty good. The boss isn't super hard, but I do just like the whole underwater theme. I think it changes it up a lot from the original game. It's kind of like a totally different mechanic, and so for that, I think it's super fun. Overall, I really like this DLC, and especially this level, so it's going into S tier. Next is the Radiant Ravine, and this is going into A tier. Up next is the Nether DLC, and I'm kind of just going to group this into one DLC because in my opinion, all the levels kind of just mashed together. They're not super special, and I believe that this is the only DLC without really like a big boss at the end. So not the best. There are more levels in this DLC than I believe there are in any other DLC. I think there's 5 levels, which is kind of cool. But overall, I'm not a huge fan of this DLC. I think it's just kind of middle of the road in C tier. Up next is the End Wilds, and I definitely believe that this one belongs in S tier. And finally, we have the Broken Citadel, and this one's also definitely going into S tier. I think I've said this a couple of times, but this has got to be my favorite level in the game, just because the map design is super fun, the loot that you can get from it is pretty good. I love the boss fight. I think the boss fight is super fun. The music during the boss fight is just out of the park. I like listening to it even when I'm not playing the game. Overall, the Echoing Void DLC is probably one of my favorites, especially when you have to go through the other levels as well to find like the Eyes of Ender and fight the Enderson. I think that's also super fun. Overall, I think they knocked it out of the park with the Echoing Void DLC, and all of the levels from it are amazing. But there you go, we've now ranked every level in the game, and there's actually a lot more than I thought there were. There's quite a few levels, and I guess I forgot the Ancient Hunts, which I don't know if that's a level, but if it is, I'd probably rank it S or A tier because I do think they're quite fun. But overall, I think I'm happy with these ratings. And of course, don't be sad if I ranked your favorite level in one of the lower tiers, because this is just what I think. Obviously, these are just levels that I like and think are fun, and yours could be totally different. But sadly, that will have to do it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you are new, I'd appreciate if you subscribe. If you like the video, new videos every Thursday, and remember to stay jolly.